Balakura, Draymore Envoy's meeting room. "Play it again," Felicity Centaur said with narrowed eyes as she and her three companions stared at the large screen in front of them. She twirled a glass of wine around using her left hand while her right gently tapped against the armrest of her seat. At her command, the screen went black for a second before the security footage began anew. On the screen, it showed the infamous and dreaded Clara Astor, known throughout all nobility circles as the Reaper, flanked by her deadly bodyguard, Cynthia Winfield, the Bloodrend, and the unknown figure that had appeared out of nowhere. They knew little about him, besides what information the intelligence operative named Jade had managed to impart upon them. Felicity herself had only come to know the man thanks to the constant transmissions sent out by House Finnegan all across the Principality, revealing that the prince and one of his siblings were alive, ready to contend against his Lord Regent, Duke Cornelius Draymore. At first, she had all but discarded the information regarding this so-called Wyatt Staples. She had no reason to pay him any attention despite his exploits. That was, of course, until the man next to her, the tall, strong, handsome, and beyond insufferable Maximilian Usarek, pointed out something she had passed on. What does it take for an unknown man to stand next to the Reaper and have her favor? That simple statement made her stop and think. It was a well-known fact that Princess Clara Astor's inner circle was not only limited, but virtually non-existent. Few were those who could interact with her with a degree of safety. Fewer were those who could stand close to her. Regardless of her otherwise limited access to close allies and readily available ladies-in-waiting, she somehow projected a shadow of influence, power, and reach that went beyond her being a princess of the Principality. Her gaze focused on the screen and how the black-armored man took one step past the door's frame, just one step, and the video's speed slowed down significantly. The several angles taken from the security cameras showcased the man moving at blinding speed, shoving the accursed princess away in the process. She paid no attention to the stumbling princess who was already looking back, her expression slowly contorting to one of surprise. Instead, she focused on the man who had, simultaneously, drawn his weapon and fired 3 precise shots that punctured the grotesque and lifelike of a Drazan, piercing the bulbous middle beneath its eye stalk. Of course, the red-armored woman had also reacted, moving to ensure the safety of her charge whilst the 4 Royal Marines present, their rifles locked behind their backs, restrained the black-armored man, preventing him from moving. The first time she'd seen the recording, she had expected to see the Royal Marines tear the man apart or tackle him into unconsciousness. Her surprise, while immense, was overshadowed by shock as the video regained its normal speed, and a scene that turned her blood into ice happened yet again, forever immortalized in footage. Princess Clara Astor, second princess of the Astorian Principality, was angry, justifiably so. Her bodyguard had just broken the protocols of proper conduct, but instead of directing her anger at the man, it was directed at Countess HFY Ferentis. The older woman apologized, but the man dropped to a knee, lowering himself as much as possible, almost shaking in place as he accepted any punishment deemed worthy to repay his transgression. Then the impossible happened. The Reaper, instead of scorning the man, comforted him, reassuring him that he had done nothing wrong. Then, to make matters worse, she offered HFY her mercy, and, of course, the matriarch took it without hesitation. That such an embarrassing event had ended with nothing more than a few exchanged words and a compromise to forget it was nearly unheard of. "No matter how many times I see it, I can't believe it," said Casimir Caiston, the oldest and most beloved son of Andrew Caiston. Next to him sat the 4th member of their group, Javier Wunder. The latter man was a young, attractive man, but overall inexperienced in the fields of nobility. What made him a capable tool were his plentiful connections and his ability to view opportunities many others ignored. The former was the spitting image of his father, broad of shoulders, intense hazel-colored hair, tall, and with a strong will. Unlike his father and grandfather, however, Casimir was a far more gentler soul, but loyal to his house and father. "We should tread carefully, even more so now. It took 4 of those mongrels to restrain him. And here I thought Cynthia Winfield was the only thing we had to truly worry about if a fight broke out," Maximilian said, his tone laced with humor to cover the underlying fear creeping at the end of each word he spoke. I ask again, Maximilian, do you have any inkling whatsoever as to who this Wyatt Staples may be? Felicity asked in no uncertain tone. And I reply once more, I do not know, replied the muscular, lavishly armored man. His entire armor was colored in varying shades of green and yellow, with only the eyes of the many lion faces that adorned his armor glowing with an intense, sapphire blue hue. He's not a lone wolf, that's for damn certain. Otherwise, I would likely have heard of someone with that level of skill. He's carrying a pair of soul snatchers. I wonder who he had to kill to earn the right to carry Royal Marine-grade weaponry. Felicity ignored the man, turning to Javier. No response from the Third Fleet records yet? None yet, replied the soft-spoken man. If he truly was part of the Third Fleet at any capacity and joined the Astor Loyalists, then I suspect those records have been expunged. It is unlikely that I am wrong in this regard, but I hope I am. It would make the task of tracking his history a lot easier. Then again, a pilot with such skills wasted as a mere garbage hauler? He asked, letting the unspoken accusation drift in the air. He will be troublesome. The princess has not incorporated anyone into her inner circle for years. Then this man appears out of nowhere after allegedly saving her life and is now proudly standing under her direct command. One must wonder how long this ruse was in the works. Could he be an Astor agent or a failed Royal Marine? Casimir added. Regardless of what the truth is, Clara Astor has come, just as his lordship predicted. We've arrived mere days before her, and our advantage has been ruined thanks to that man. We stand on equal grounds at the negotiating tables, Felicity reasoned, exhaling deeply as she stared at the screen. Could it be possible that it was all a ruse on her part? Asked Javier. Then he shook his head, answering his own question. No, their reactions were genuine. If what the Reaper said is true, then it is no wonder why that man reacted the way he did when faced with a possible Drazen threat. I feel no shame in admitting I jumped when I saw them the first time. Ghastly things. As bad as that is, I'm more concerned about the ship she arrived in, Casimir pointed out. That's a Reckoning-class assault destroyer. The same kind my cousin once removed, Samuel, was honored with taking command over. He exhaled deeply, sorrow and measured, controlled anger palpable through his words. It seems father was correct. Grandfather lied regarding the loss of the Samuel's glory. My cousin was murdered, likely defeated in an honorable duel, and his ship conquered. My father will have strong words to say to grandfather when they meet in person. How unexpected! Who would have thought that the vile silver-tongued serpent better known as Tamarin Caiston would lie? Maximilian mocked, barking a laugh at the end. But damn me and my house if that ancient bastard isn't a master at veiling his intentions and twisting his words into half-truths and pushing others against a corner of his design. I'd hate to have him as an enemy, or as my employer. Thank the spirits I never signed the contract he offered me. Yes, how fortunate for all of us that you didn't, Felicity added, barely resisting the urge to roll her eyes. She disliked Maximilian on a personal level, brutish, self-centered, and undeniably full of himself. But he was a lone wolf, and he was worth every damn credit and privilege her house paid to keep his talents at the service of House Centaur. Intra-house affairs aside, this means that the false prince has one of our ships under his command. Perhaps more if the ambush at Gintrax was even more disastrous than we feared. The potential risk of having their secrets stolen is far too great to ignore. It won't be an issue for a long time. We haven't been able to decipher the secrets of these black ships, but we are growing closer with every passing day. House Finnegan will not be able to outcompete us no matter how much the Marchioness cries about it, declared the silver-haired man. But we shouldn't be complacent about it either, countered Casimir. Lady Felicity, what is our course of action? Should we demand the return of the Samuel's glory? Do you expect her to listen to half your sentence before having her bloody monster behead you? Don't be a fool, Casimir. That ship was captured. It became a prized ship the moment Samuel died. There's nothing we can do about it except try to destroy it or retake it in combat. Felicity let out a heavy sigh before continuing. And before you suggest infiltrating their ship or planting explosives to cripple it, Maximilian, we are in neutral territory. Any hostile action taken by either side will only hurt us more than it would benefit us. Then what are we to do? Maximilian asked, arms crossed and an eyebrow raised. We make the first move, Javier replied, gaining their attention. The outburst of this Wyatt Staples is unbecoming and showcases a great vulnerability surrounding the Reaper. If he is an Aster agent, then he should have been trained to not react in such a manner. He could be a liability, a chink in the otherwise impenetrable armor of that wretched being. "There's no need to be insulting without merit," Casimir reprimanded, but stroked the edges of his mouth with his right thumb and index finger slowly. "However, you bring a good point. Their reactions were true and natural. Princess Clara's response was peculiar, unexpected. If I were to guess, this man has a long and lasting history involving the Drazen, as she revealed to HFY. Perhaps he was recalled from his duties and has always been a close confidant of Her Majesty?" Silence fell between the four of them for long moments until Felicity spoke up once more. "It is a shame Veronica couldn't come with us. Mayhaps she'd know who this man is. Be that as it may, we must move forth and secure either the loyalty or neutrality of House Ferentis. Javier, your words speak truth and point at a possibility for us to exploit. Or rather, an opening for me to use." The ebony-skinned woman stood up, and with an elegant motion, she made her long black hair dance for a few seconds. "You're not going to try and seduce him, right?" asked Maximilian, with an edge of amusement in his voice. "As easy as that task would be," Felicity replied with absolute confidence and not a small dose of arrogance, "I need only to make him feel comfortable and he'll tell me everything I need to know without him realizing it. The Reaper is strong, smart, deceptive, and dangerous. But her pretentiousness is a great weakness that I can exploit thanks to this strange bodyguard of hers. Now, if you'll excuse me, gentlemen, the will of his lordship shall be done." The trio of men watched the fetching Felicity Centaur leave the room, flanked by 2 Marines and followed closely by 3 of her maids. Once they were alone, Maximilian let out a chuckle. "Word of advice? Never underestimate a woman like her. You'll come to regret it otherwise." Casimir and Javier could only nod in silent agreement. Balakura, Ferentis Grand Palace. Wyatt considered himself a patient man for the most part, but his patience had been tested in more ways than one. After having had his fill of the delicious food and baked goods provided to them by the Ferentis servants, the waiting game began. His mind was more at peace, safe in the knowledge that while reckless, neither Cynthia nor Clara judged him for his actions in an ill manner. But as time went by, he began to grow anxious at first, and then annoyed until at long last, Genac Ferentis, alongside his wife, HFY, and half a dozen other nobles entered the room. There was a polite but short-lived exchange of words, only for Genac to say the meeting would be held the day after. To his surprise, Clara accepted it for what it was, and even Cynthia remained calm and collected. As they walked through a beautiful garden, Wyatt let out a groan escape his throat. "Is something the matter, Wyatt?" Clara asked. 4 hours. They made us wait for 4 hours, only to exchange some pleasantries and leave," he replied, eyes narrowed behind his helmet. "I don't suppose that was an insult, was it?" Clara's lips curled into a gentle smile. "Not at all. I'm surprised we only had to wait 4 hours. Usually, these diplomatic talks take place over the course of several days. First, it starts with a greeting and fashionable lateness to showcase the power and standing of the host house. Second, pleasantries are exchanged, and usually there are short reunions and social gatherings in order to rest and be amazed by the wealth and splendor of our generous hosts. Thirdly, depending on the nature of what is to be discussed, reaching an agreement after reviewing and countering all points could take anywhere between 1 week to a month. Wyatt nearly stopped after hearing her answer. "And Dad wanted me to join the diplomatic corps? My princess, if I may, what even is the point of wasting so much time?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "Long-standing tradition," was her immediate answer. "It also serves as a buffer time for everyone to get a better understanding of what the other involved parties are after if more than 2 sides are present. Current events are playing in our favor, and it is the main reason why my first objective was to come here as quickly as possible. Genac knows a decision must be reached soon, and he's aiming to keep the stronger hand on the table at the cost of sidestepping traditions. A brilliant move on his part, too. In these uncertain times, such actions can be forgiven and overlooked. I will never understand the hedge maze that is blue blood posturing and scheming. It was bad enough watching from afar as a commoner, but looking from the inside, how could anyone enjoy these many rules and stupid traditions?" He asked himself only for Clara to stifle a giggle a second later. Believe me, Wyatt, the majority of nobles are raised to deal with such things from a young age. Some are simply more adept than others, whether they like it or not, Clara added, coming to a halt suddenly before turning to her left. Wyatt followed her gaze and found a small group walking down the crossroad path. The pilot quickly made out the leading figure was a noble lady of incredible beauty, with long black hair, a curvaceous figure that her long silvery dress accentuated and contrasted nicely against her ebony skin. Her eyes were warm and piercing, honey-colored, masking a trap of promised sweetness behind them. The way she sauntered her hips with every careful step she took held no intention other than to proclaim her presence. "Ah, Princess Clara Astor, Your Majesty," the woman said once she was close enough, stopping at a respectful distance from the princess's entourage. The dark-haired woman bowed ever so slightly, showcasing submission. "It is an honor to be in your presence. It is a shame that circumstances had brought us to opposing ends of the negotiating table." The black-haired man tensed for a moment, but then relaxed, following Cynthia's example. "Ah, you must be Viscountess Felicity Centaur. A pleasure to meet you at long last. I've heard many tales surrounding your exploits. All of them positive, I assure you," Clara replied, her tone matching that of the black-haired woman. "I must agree with you, Lady Felicity. It is a shame that such ignoble circumstances have brought us to conflict where none was needed." "Such are the struggles of power and the weight of the throne, is it not?" Felicity added with a gentle smile. "Your arrival, I must confess, was rather unexpected. Of course, your entry into Ferentis territory was noticed, but who would have thought that it would be you, Your Majesty, who we have to contend to gain the favor of House Ferentis? I'm both thrilled and nervous at the prospect of facing you in such delicate and important dealings." "I wish I could say the same, Lady Felicity. I find no enjoyment in the circumstances that brought us to face each other as rivals. Nevertheless, face each other we shall, and I assure you, I will be the one victorious," Clara declared with confidence. "However, such trifle things are best reserved for the table, not the gardens. Out of cordiality, is my uncle in good health?" "His Lord Regent is strong and sound. Lady Veronica and Lord Gabriel are also in good health. This will please you to hear, no doubt," Felicity replied, unflinching. Clara let out a short-lived but relieved sigh. "That is indeed good to hear. It soothes my heart to know my cousins and uncle have not to worry about the clutches of sickness and disease strangling their necks." "Quite so, Princess. We were relieved to see the Prince, and yourself, of course, safe and sound during the ceremony held by Marchioness Amelia Finnegan. Contrary to what you may believe, his lordship does not wish to bring harm to his nephew, the Prince," declared the woman with a friendly smile. "It is regrettable that conflict arose at all." "Regrettable," Clara concurred. "So many lives and ships have been lost already. The longer this conflict lasts, the weaker the principality will become. I would ask you to talk sense into my uncle, but we both know that is a Sisyphean endeavor, as it would be making the prince understand he is not suitable to be the prince, and that the principality requires a strong, firm leadership until he or another more capable man or woman is ready to become the prince," Felicity remarked with a longing sigh. "As it is, as it were, fate is a fickle thing. May this conflict end soon, Your Majesty." "May it end soon," Clara agreed, her expression never faltering. "I'm terribly sorry to cut our conversation short, but I feel terribly tired and in need of rest. Wyatt, I shall retire to my quarters. Accompany Lady Felicity as a sign of my goodwill until she dismisses you or I call for you. Treat her as you would treat me and do enjoy the gardens." Wyatt, who had been listening to the conversation and following it as closely as he could, was momentarily taken aback by her order. The exchange between the two women had been pleasant enough, at least on the surface, but there were masked, snide remarks and carefully worded jabs at one's pride, he was certain of it. Some were more blatant than others, but the conversation was anything but amicable at the end of things. And now Clara had just ordered him to act as an additional escort to the woman? What was he supposed to say to that? He looked at Felicity for a moment, and bereft of any other options, saluted. "As you command, my princess," Wyatt replied, unsure what was Clara's goal. He joined the Marine on the left as he watched Clara, Cynthia, and their escort of Royal Marines continue their walk. He expected to hear another command in his mind, but none came. Sighing internally, he focused on the task at hand. Maybe this is my punishment? If so, I fail to see a lesson to be learned by serving as an escort for a traitor, thought the pilot as Felicity resumed her pace. He remained silent for several minutes as they walked through the gardens, part of him ready to fight in case the Marines tried to do anything, and another part of him constantly reassuring himself about the rules of neutrality until the Centaur spoke up. "Sir Wyatt, was it? Please do join my side," said the honey-eyed woman. Wyatt was about to reply that he was perfectly fine where he was, but recalled the orders given to him by Clara. Silently, he broke formation and joined her left side. The woman then raised her left arm slightly, expecting something. Wyatt raised an unseen eyebrow in confusion. After a few seconds, she lowered her arm. "My, you aren't quite the gentleman I expected you to be. Or perhaps is the fact that we stand on opposing sides the reason for your rudeness?" she asked softly, without any trace of anger or ill intent that he could detect. "Lady Felicity, pardon me. I've been a knight banneret for a short period of time. I have yet to learn, understand, and apply all the rules and traditions expected of someone born to nobility," Wyatt replied sincerely. "Ah, I see. It is quite all right, my dear Sir Knight. I retract my words in light of your lack of knowledge," replied the taller woman. "If so is the case, then congratulations are in order. For a commoner like yourself to earn the favor of the prince himself and gain an ennoblement is a tremendous achievement." "Think nothing of it, Lady Felicity. I was merely doing my duty to the Principality and House Astor, nothing more," Wyatt replied dryly. "And you've been rewarded. That, my dear Sir Knight, is worthy of praise. To stand next to royalty is something many would happily kill for the mere chance to obtain," Felicity pressed on. Wyatt frowned slightly. "I need not whisper words into the ears of my princess, Lady Felicity. My duty and service are enough reward." Felicity let out a coquettish laugh. "Quite so, dear Sir Knight. Fret not, for I would not attempt to buy your loyalty or convince you of the worthiness of our cause. It is clear that you shall stand alongside the princess's side. Not am I a heartless harpy or malicious siren as to try to lure you and turn you against her. Enemies we may be, but enemies who can be cordial and truthful, yes?" "I suppose," replied the pilot. "What is she playing at?" he asked himself as he glanced at her from the safety of his helmet. If he had to pick a word to describe her, that would be alluring. But he was not about to be tricked by that alone. "A man of few words and boundaries is a precious thing," she commented in response to his dry reply. "I can see why Princess Clara keeps you close. A stalwart and formidable man is worth his weight in rhodium. It is a shame that you serve her. A man of your talents would be most welcomed by his lordship, Duke Draymore. But alas, that is not the case. I can only hope that you survive this conflict, and that once the Lord Regent is victorious, you shall use your talents for the good of the Principality." Wyatt frowned, refusing to reply. What she said made him think about something he had not considered before. If the Duke won, preposterous as the idea was, and Clara and Cynthia were to survive, what would he do? His loyalty was to the Principality and to House Astor. If the treacherous Duke won, would House Astor cease to exist? Would Clara remain a princess? Would Cynthia remain at her side? Would he be allowed to remain at their side? What would he do if they lost? Return to Volantis, to his family in defeat? Remain on a reformed Royal Navy? The more he thought about it, the more he disliked the likely scenarios his mind conjured. "Whatever the future has in store for me, I shall face it. I won't abandon them no matter what," he promised himself, resolute. "Your silence speaks volumes of your character, dear Sir Knight. Word of advice? You should stay in the good graces of the princess. Your blunder has reached my eyes," she said, as her smile morphed to a more predatory one as she saw Wyatt stiffen slightly. Taking her opportunity, she pressed her advantage. "Though I can't blame you for such a jerk reaction. Those statues were truly horrid. I cannot begin to comprehend why his lordship Count and his lady wife, the Countess, allowed their son to place such monstrosities at the entrance of a waiting room." "It was my mistake," Wyatt commented, the event replaying in his mind, though the shame he felt was nowhere near as prevalent anymore. "There is no shame in admitting one's shortcomings. You did it to protect the princess. If I were in her place, I would not blame you either," Felicity proclaimed, her voice soft, sweet, and empathic. Wyatt was momentarily taken aback by her words, and as much as he wanted to believe her salving words, he felt there was something underneath them, something he wasn't seeing. "I'm a fortunate man, Lady Felicity. You would be a fool to not believe so, Sir Knight. You've climbed so high already. Who knows how much higher you'll go? Much like myself, if I dare to make the comparison. It may not be the same, but I count as a seat among those lucky few to surround the table of the Lord Regent. One hears curious things and is privy to secrets and plans that should not reach the ears of others. But there are a few other snippets of gossip and information that harm no one. Nothing more than hearsay in all but essence." She leaned in closer, slowing her pace as she lightly pressed her arm against his armored one. Wyatt blushed slightly, unable to push her away or move aside for fear of insulting her or causing another unsightly incident. Before he could make up his scrambled mind, she spoke again. "House Ferentis will side with the Lord Regent," she said, fully believing her words. "They'll see the benefits of being under the protection and guidance the banners of Draymore bring with them. We have the stronger hand, Sir Knight. You cannot win here. Surely you must understand this." "You won't," he replied without hesitation. "You're traitors at the end of the day. You, your escorts, and Duke Draymore. The foodstuffs produced by House Ferentis shall feed the bellies of those loyal to the prince, not yours, Lady Centaur." Felicity's smile widened at his reply, and she pulled back. "That will be settled on the negotiating table, my dear Sir Knight," she said with a gentle, salacious tone before coming to a full halt. "Thank you for entertaining me with some marvelous conversation, Sir Wyatt Staples. Your duty is ended. Send my best regards to Princess Clara, would you kindly?" She said, bowed her head cordially, and then left, followed closely by her guardians and the 3 maids that had shadowed them the entire time. Wyatt stared at the tall, black-haired woman walking away for several moments, thoughts racing across his brain faster than a fighter at full speed. Strange. What did she want? And why did she leave with that victorious smile? He stood there for several more moments until the honey-eyed woman was out of his sight. Turning around, he sighed tiredly. Her eyes were similar to my mother's. Not quite the same, but close enough. Damn it. How are they doing, I wonder? I want to talk to them again, but now's not the time. Bringing up a hand to his forehead, he rested his head on it. And at the same time, I want to avoid seeing them again for as long as possible. I've got a lot of things to explain to them. Especially the eyes. Dad's going to faint for sure. With a long sigh of lamentation escaping his lips, Wyatt looked around the garden and quickly realized a problem. How do I get out of here? Volantis, Staples' household. Wirt Staples sat before the brand-new monitor Wham had convinced them to buy. It was only twice the size of their old monitor, hence why they relented in the end. It wasn't the only thing new around his home either. Everyone got data pads. He was able to afford to make the few replacements that 24 makeshift repairs were simply not able to keep them together anymore. New curtains hung from their windows. Winona, his wife, got new kitchen appliances. A second-hand but well-maintained sofa rested in their living room, a soft new bed that helped with her back pains, and several tools that needed replacement in his garage workshop. His wife, bless her heart and thoughtfulness, had all but drilled into their minds that the absurdly vast amount of credits their oldest son had sent them was to remain safely locked away in his account. She only allowed interior and necessary things to be bought or replaced, and outright forbade them from even thinking about buying new clothes, footwear, or anything non-essential. As much as she wanted to shout to everyone who would listen that her firstborn son had become a noble, she knew better than to draw unnecessary attention to themselves. He recalled how he had to plead with her to buy all the medicine and treatments she needed to treat her condition, and he only won because Wyatt specifically sent them the money to treat her. Just as he was going to pick the controller up, the door clicked and then opened to reveal his beloved wife coming in wearing a long dress, a white blouse, and a large hat to protect her from the rays of Vatis, their star. A large, heavy-looking bag dangled from her hands. He stood up and walked to meet his wife, sharing a smile once they were mere inches apart and then closing to unite their lips in a kiss. It only lasted a few seconds before they broke apart and his wife let out a tired sigh. "Long day?" Wirt asked as he turned back. facing the living room and taking his wife's bag from her hands. "Not really," Winona replied, following her husband slowly. "The medicine works, and my back didn't hurt at all." She paused for a moment, turning to the monitor's screen only to sigh a moment later. "Wyatt should be storing his credits for his future." "Dear, we've barely made a dent in what he sent us, and he said he had more. He could be lying, of course. You can't tell when that boy is lying or telling you the truth, but I don't think he'd lie about that," Wirt replied, setting the bag on the floor next to the sofa before turning to help his wife sit down. Once she was seated, he joined her side, retaking his claimed spot. "Now why don't you tell me what got you so flustered?" "Everything, Wirt," Winona replied, leaning back. "Our son is out there risking his life for what? So that blue bloods can keep their asses firmly planted on cushy thrones? Our son, Winona, is out there fighting for the prince and the principality. He's out there protecting us and doing his darndest to prevent a civil war from happening," Wirt replied, softly caressing his wife's hands. Winona nodded slowly. "At least I can rest easy knowing that this mess is a succession dispute." "Everyone is so scared, Wirt. Everyone that came for this week's lesson only talked about the price increase on many goods, how the orbital traffic diminished, and some even talked about pirate assaults happening across neighboring systems. Wirt, I'm scared. For us, for our sons, for Wyatt. I haven't heard from my sister. And I haven't heard anything from my siblings either," Wirt mumbled. "I hope they're okay. Working on water harvesting stations and asteroid mining outposts isn't safe if there are pirates lurking about." "At least my sister is on a planet," Winona added. "What about you? I thought you were going to be out until tomorrow." "Work was canceled when I arrived," Wirt replied, frowning. "The shipment didn't come, and we finished all the backlog projects we had scheduled. Only the maintenance guys were called in," he chuckled. "Gives me more time to tinker around and fix stuff. I actually finished fixing Sikaro's fridge before you arrived." Winona leaned in, placing a quick kiss on her husband's left cheek. "And your idea of relaxing was watching the ceremony procession again?" "Can you blame me?" Wirt replied with a snort. "Our son, our Wyatt, is there, standing tall and proud, holding a banner like a true nobleman. And he's doing it for a princess of the principality," he exclaimed with pride and pressed the play button on the controller. Soft, inspiring music filled the room as two distinct voices commented on the event animatedly. "Now that the prince has demonstrated that he is unharmed and ready to take the fight against the treacherous duke, here followers yet another member of the royal house Astor. And wouldn't you know it, it is the second princess herself, Princess Clara Astor," exclaimed a boisterous man. "Just as her brother, the prince, she walks with regal poise and power. Such splendor, such beauty. Can anyone doubt that we are witnessing an event that comes once in a lifetime? Noble houses and commoners alike should rejoice in the chance of basking in the glory radiating from the prince and his fetching sister, Princess Clara," added an excited woman. "Doesn't she look utterly gorgeous in that dress?" "Nothing less could be expected for a member of the royal house Astor," replied the man. "The banners and those given the immeasurable honor of carrying them must be bursting with joy at the chance to serve their royal majesties," the man exclaimed as Clara sat on her throne and the room erupted in chaos. A few seconds later, the audio shifted, favoring the music and drowning the chants and proclamations beneath it, just enough so that the announcers could be heard. "It is not every day that so many grand and significant houses are gathered in one place outside the Council of Nobles, but among them, there seems to be a newcomer," the woman commented, and a camera zoomed in on Wyatt's banner, showcasing his heraldic shield. For a split second, the camera focused on Wyatt's expression, but it quickly passed him over in favor of capturing more angles from the three most prominent figures present. The video was easily rewind back a few seconds, pausing on the shot that showcased both Wyatt's serious expression and his heraldic shield. Both parents felt a surge of pride, relief, joy, and dread fill their hearts as intensely as the first time the mandatory transmission reached Volantis and was broadcast everywhere across the planet, from Fire to the most remote outposts and villages. To see their son not only alive and well, but chosen by royalty to be elevated to nobility, was the dream many a commoner wished to achieve more than anything, no matter the cost. However, they were not ignorant of the dangers such an unparalleled grace brought with it. Winona, in particular, thanks to her position as a semi-regular social worker who taught other younger commoner women how to knit and cook, was beholden to gossip and rumors that coursed through the great and vast capital city across all social strata. Tales about a newly elevated commoner family, or just an individual buying a knighthood only to lose it all in the coming months. How other lesser nobles hounded the newly arrived in order to take down the competition, or tricking them into one-sided deals that shackled them to one house or another were all too common. Then there were the dangerous tales of new nobles who allowed the power to corrupt their heads, thinking themselves all-powerful and invincible only for them to commit atrocities. Worse yet were not the tales that were mere gossip, but factual truth that didn't even involve being elevated to nobility. A scant positive change in one's fortune was enough to attract thieves and liars and scammers like starving Clixall to a freshly plotted land or slain prey, hoping to bleed out as many credits from a potential fool. After Wyatt's call and the vast amount of wealth he'd placed directly under them, Winona Staples was both thankful that her beloved son never stopped thinking about them, but also she feared for his life and well-being. She doubted that her son would let his newfound power get to his head, corrupting and intoxicating his mind and vision to see himself as something superior to those under him. She was equally sure, however, that her son would not be happy with his new position, especially with everything that position was bound to burden his shoulders. She wouldn't know any better. She was a commoner, after all, but she knew enough to never want to involve herself in such dealings. What she feared were the dangers that came from the outside. Thieves came in many forms, be they opportunistic or beggars with sad tales about their lives. Charming women who would do their best to get a hold of her son and latch to him much like a parasite burrows into its host. A frightening amount of those stories she heard were either related to such people or, worse, within the family itself. Her family, aside from her sister, were not close by any means, and her husband's family was limited to that of his brother and sister. They had nephews and nieces, but had never met each other outside the odd picture here and there. So, at least she had nothing to worry about. They wouldn't know who he was even if they tried to remember him from his childhood pictures. As she stared into the screen, watching her soon stand so handsome, proud, strong, and elegant clad in black armor fit for nobles and bearing proudly his heraldic shield, she couldn't help but remember the countless nights in which her beloved son woke up screaming in pure terror, finding him under his bed or curled up against a corner, crying hot, searing tears of fear caused by the horrors he saw and lived through. How he clung to her and his father in sleepless nights, afraid to go to sleep. The days he spent without eating, how the boyish glint in his eyes was choked out, replaced by an unbridled fear to interact with anyone not close to him. Wyatt's childhood had been stolen, and what came back was a shadow of the rambunctious and open-eyed child that had done his best to earn a spot on that accursed trip. More than anything, what hurt the most was his isolation. There was never any eagerness in his voice again, no joy, no wonder. He never tried to make friends again, and he embraced his studies and duties, devoting himself to nothing else except the rare few moments in which he would smile during a party celebration or when he could immerse himself in activities that soothed him. Before the incident, he always complained about knitting, how it was something for girls to learn. After he returned, he never complained again, but knitting made him smile, and the fear in his eyes would be gone, at least for a few hours. The old Warlow taught him how to paint, which reignited his imagination. Moreover, after all the therapists and doctors that failed to help him, he helped himself, crawled out of the abyss he was in, and continued forth. He never told her so, but she was certain the only reason he sought to work at the nearby woodmill was because he needed it to some capacity. She'd seen him carving at a log or large hunk of wood with an almost twisted smirk on his lips, eyes focused on his work, and enjoying seeing dried plants, weeds, and wood burn. Her husband, ever the pacifist, always made sure to talk to their son and push him away from any ideas regarding revenge for his own safety. After his 12th birthday, his efforts and their support seemed to work, as she stopped seeing the bloodthirsty edge that sparkled in his eyes from that point onward, but his dream to be among the stars remained intact despite everything he went through. But her son was far from being like the boys around his age. He cared not for friendships or building any sort of romantic relationships. Where other boys his age would start thinking about dating or starting their working careers and plan on starting a family, he signed up for the academy as soon as he could to fulfill his dream. At the time, she lamented Wyatt's loneliness and isolation, almost to the point of turning himself into background noise. Now, she was thankful for it. Whilst she couldn't do anything to help protect her son due to sheer distance, she could protect their family as much as she could. No one had come to pay them a visit, not even their few close neighbors. They haven't seen Wyatt since he left, and while he hadn't changed much, he was no longer the teenager that left for the academy all those years ago. And if their neighbors hadn't recognized him, then it was unlikely that anyone working at the wood mill, his old teachers, classmates, and doctors would. As long as they kept their mouths shut and avoided drawing attention to themselves, no one would ever figure out that her firstborn had risen to such heights. "Isn't he just the most handsome man you've ever seen?" she asked, her voice breaking past her lips as she teared up a little, a happy, soft smile spreading across her cheeks the more she stared at her son. "He inherited my charming looks," boasted Wirt with a knowing smirk, eyes beaming with pride. Winona let out a hearty chuckle, wiping away the few tears that had formed. "Then I can rest easy. No noblewoman will be interested in his rustic appeal," she joked. "Bah," Wirt countered, waving his right hand around. "Other than the prince, there is no better suitor in that grand hall." "Wyatt would disagree with you, dear," Winona countered, squeezing her husband's hand gently. Wirt nodded. "That he would. But he wouldn't change our opinions. We're his parents. It's our job to see him as the best man there is, only matched by his brothers," he chuckled. "Wham has been focusing on his work a lot more lately, too. That kid is gifted. He'll make an excellent handyman and repairman that even the Orantes will call upon. I just know it. And our dear Westcall will become the greatest hunter on the planet. Who knows? Maybe he'll be invited to a parade or a dinner in the future once he gains his 20th feather." Winona joined in, imagining the potential great future their other two sons could reach. Suddenly, a series of knocks called to their door, breaking the couple's peaceful moment. Wirt stood up, placing a hand on his wife's shoulder before moving to the door. Peering through the peephole, he let out a surprised gasp before opening the door to reveal an elderly man holding a cane. "Warlow?" Wirt asked as he stepped aside, letting the older man walk into his house. "Sorry for the unexpected visit," the man excused himself, his voice gruff and ancient, revealing every year that he carried on his slightly arching back. "Winona," he greeted before looking around the house with interest. "The kids ain't home, right?" plied as her husband closed the door, and then moved to guide the old man to the one-person sofa chair. "Wham is out working, and Westcall is 4 sectors away dealing with a sudden clixel boom in that region." "Thank you, Wirt," Warlow said as he sat down, setting his cane aside and twisting his neck until it cracked. The old man sighed in relief before continuing. "New video screen?" he asked, pointing at the thing. It was only then that the couple realized the mistake they had made. Wyatt was still showcased on the screen, revealing the truth they had been guarding so much. Wirt almost lunged for the controller, but a throaty, raspy laugh from the old man with hair so pale it was almost silvery stopped them, his brown eyes sparkling with humor rarely found in the otherwise serious and sour-faced man. "No point in turning it off now. My eyes may be old, but I can see just fine." "So, Wyatt's a blue blood now, eh?" Warlow stated, smiling. Winona and Wirt exchanged a long glance before Wirt joined his wife on the sofa once more. They held hands and nodded at the same time. "Yes, Wyatt's a noble now, Warlow." Winona leaned forth, frowning. "You're not going to judge our boy for it or hate him because of it now, are you? Because if that's the case, you should leave before I say things I rather not, Warlow." "Can't say I approve," the old man confessed with a shrug. "But who am I to judge him? I never kept secret that I hate the damn blue bloods. Gods and deities above know I spent too much time around them when I was part of the Royal Navy. Pricks and ass-kissers, always barking and growling like animals for the chance to hold just a little more power and influence over the rest, always seeking glorious combats and easy victories. he exclaimed angrily before spitting to accentuate his words. Then, if you're not here to chastise him, why come at all? Wirt asked, confused. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't seeing things, Warlow replied, his expression turning somber. Poor kid. I sure hope he knows what he's doing, or that he's got someone giving him a hand. Otherwise, they're going to eat him alive. Damn blue bloods and their stupid games for power, he remarked with an angry scowl. Lost plenty of buddies to nobles preening their feathers, trying to be like them freaky alien birds, he sighed tiredly. So, what rank is he? He said he was a knight banneret and that the prince himself was the one that ennobled him, Winona replied, unable to suppress a jolt of pride from coursing through her body. Warlow choked and coughed a few times, eyes growing wide. Winona was quick to move and rushed to the kitchen, quickly returning with a glass of water. The old man drank slowly from the glass until half was gone. Setting it on the small desk next to him, he cleared his throat before managing to talk again. Forget what I said. I approve of the rascal, Warlow said as Winona returned to her husband's side. Well, as long as he doesn't start seeing others as toys or mere numbers, I won't say anything against the boy. Knight banneret. Do you know what that means? Before he told us? Very little. The only thing I knew about it was that it was a special sort of knighthood. But Westcall asked around and found that a knight banneret is tied to the will and protection of a strong house, Wirt replied, his voice serious yet trembling. I think he's bound to the royal house Astor. Most likely so, Warlow agreed, humming deeply for several seconds after. I don't understand the rules and whatnot of a royal procession well, but I think Wyatt is serving under Princess Clara if carrying his banner to announce her arrival is anything to go by. What does that mean, Warlow? Asked Winona, swallowing her sudden nervousness. Warlow shook his head. I was part of the auxilia. I never got to bump around with nobles much other than when they pointed me where to go. But even I have to admit that some nobles aren't total pieces of crap. If Wyatt serves under nobles with a head on their shoulders, he may yet survive both this coup and life as a blue blood. I hope that's the case, Warlow, said the nervous woman. As proud and happy as I am for his newfound fortune in life, I'm his mother, and I worry. If he has to choose between duty and his life, I know what his choice will be, despite how much I wish for him to return home. Warlow nodded. Aye, a good mother always worries for her children's safety. Wazim would be just like you in your place, Winona, Warlow said, his expression longing and melancholic. I wasn't aware that you were married, Wirt commented, surprised. Warlow let out a hollow laugh. No, not married. Had a fling with her during service. Knocked her up, I did, twice. Lost her to damn pirates, all thanks to inept blue bloods. He was silent for a long moment that seemed to stretch to encompass an eternity. Never found any other that could touch my heart that way again. Wish I would have married her, though. I'm sorry for your loss, Warlow, said Winona, not knowing what else to say. Don't be. It was a long time ago. Is my only regret, that is, Warlow replied, losing the sadness that was reflected in his eyes. I still got my kids and grandchildren. Was a shit father, though, but I tried my best for them. I get to see them and their kids on calls and the odd visits, so I don't complain. I ain't truly alone. He paused for a moment. But that boy has been alone, inside, for a long time. I got lost, too, after Wuzim died. Went to dark places. My kids pulled me out of the gutter when I should have been there for them. Your boy is lucky to have you. He paused again so he could smile at the couple. Heh, I actually miss having the runt over for painting lessons. Shame he never got around making new friends, though. About that, Wirt began, but stopped to glance at his wife, who, in turn, gave him a short nod. Wyatt told us that he made a friend. It took him 14 years and a succession dispute for him to make an actual new friend. Maybe he isn't as alone as he was before. A warm, happy smile spread across the old veteran's wrinkled face. Here's hoping the boy stands tall and proud to force those damn traitors to choke on their own bile. Slowly, and with some effort on his part, he stood up with the aid of his cane. Now, you and the kids make sure to keep your lips tight about Wyatt, you hear? Mouth-breathing idiots will try to scour any information if his name ever gets out. With any luck, the Third Fleet burned his records, so don't go around wasting the credits he sent you, you hear? The married couple stood up, accompanying the old man to the door. It was Wirt who stammered first. How did you know Wyatt sent you credits? Kid loves you even if he can't express it in other ways. I know he sent you something. How much? Not a bloody idea. But I ain't seeing you wincing, Winona. That means he sent enough to pay for your medicine and treatments, didn't he? He chuckled when the woman blushed slightly in embarrassment. He let out a raspy laugh and walked toward the door. No worries. No need to try and bribe me. I get enough with my service pension and what my kids can spare from time to time. I'll keep my mouth shut, too. So Wyatt better not become a useless, self-absorbed blue blood, or I'll break my cane over his thick skull if I have to and beat some sense back into him, you hear? Winona smiled, losing her blush and moving past the old man, blocking his way out of her house. Gently, she grabbed his cane-wielding hand, forcing the man to look at her face. Mr. Warlow, would you like to join us for dinner? Warlow smiled. As long as it ain't no damn La Choa in it, yes. Hate the buggers. Winona let go and moved aside. I'll tell you all about my stories during service tonight. Following day, Balakura, diplomatic chambers. Wyatt stood next to Clara as she sat at one end of the surprisingly small and simple table. The wood was of outstanding quality, even if he didn't know what sort of trees grew on the planet, or if it had been imported from somewhere else. Across the table sat Felicity Sintor, looking as confident and calm as he'd seen her the day before. The table itself was circular, approximately 4 meters in diameter, with no intricate patterns or decorations to be found on its legs, surface, or sides, which contrasted with the heavily ornate chairs the Princess and Felicity Sintor, plus her 3 companions, were occupying. Another set of chairs remained empty, waiting for the arrival of Geenock Ferentis, head of his house, and 3 others who would join him. On Clara's other side stood Cynthia, solid and unmoving as a statue. Behind them, the Royal Marines stood in similar stances, whilst the Draymore envoys had 10 veteran Marines, judging by their equipment, guarding them. Since the moment both parties entered the room, they had remained silent, keeping a peaceful but tense air between them. Time lost all meaning as each minute felt as long as an era until, much to his relief, the doors opened to reveal Geenock Ferentis holding the hand of his lady wife, HFY Ferentis. Behind them, 2 younger men followed. He recognized Yolti Ferentis, their oldest son, but the second man was new to him. He was slightly shorter than Jolti and shared similar features, though his hair reached past his shoulders and sparkled in a multicolored spectrum each time the rays of the local star hit it. Around them, 24 guards escorted them until they sat down on the empty seats. There was no fanfare and no music, not even an announcer present at their moment of entry. Wyatt raised an eyebrow in surprise as another minute-long silence strangled the room. It ended when Geenock placed a metallic cylinder on the table and inhaled deeply. Today, marked as Unis 17, 4156 Standard Astorian Principality Calendar, and September 21st, 26702 Standard Terran Calendar, shall be noted to start cordial diplomatic talks with the envoys from His Lordship, Duke Cornelius Draymore of Camrim, and the envoys of His Most Beloved Majesty the Prince. Representing the former stands Viscountess Felicity Sintor. Upon hearing the introduction, the dark-haired woman stood up for a few moments, bowed her head at Geenock, and sat down. Representing the latter stands Princess Clara Astor. Much like Felicity before her, Clara stood up and repeated the same motions with elegant precision. I, Geenock Ferentis, head of House Ferentis, welcome you to this ancient table of debate. Let its simplicity humble your words and cool your humors. May that which is to be spoken be true and measured, for we all sit as equals around this most auspicious table. May those who break the peace this table command, and the written law that was written in blood by the great and mighty Julius Astor, know his wrath, and be forever marked as outcasts and duplicitous villains, unworthy of the very air they breathe. I solemnly swear to abide and honor the ancient tradition and subject myself to the will of the law, said Felicity and Clara at the same time, their voices ringing with sing-song splendor. Wyatt felt a jolt course through his body. Whatever he had witnessed happening was leagues above what he had witnessed on Woodshaft. There was no hesitation, no trembling, and no indications that Clara was anything but focused on the task at hand. His posture became firmer, the full weight of the situation more than apparent. "I have heard your pledges, and they have been written down," Jinak announced. "Let the negotiations begin. As tradition dictates, Lady Felicity shall be the first to speak." "And speak first I shall, my Lord Jinak," Felicity replied with a gracious tone. "At the risk of sounding arrogant for speaking the truth, my lord, I ask thee, what can you expect to gain from a duplicitous murderer that brought ruination to so many houses not even a decade ago? All the pain she caused through the application of a mere whim confused as justice delivered?" Wyatt was stunned at the bluntness of the black-haired woman was using. He glanced at Cynthia, expecting to find her clenching her fists or barely being able to contain her rage. To his surprise, though, she remained calm and collected. While he couldn't see Clara's expression, her body language showcased a demure yet unshakable posture. "Why put your trust in such a devious woman, royal or not, in these tumultuous times?" The black-haired woman's tone never faltered, always showcasing a measured politeness that, puzzlingly, was never betrayed by her harsh words. "His Lord Regent, Duke Cornelius Draymore, wishes to impose order and stability that could not be gained from such a weak prince. He wishes not to depose his nephew, but to guide the principality with his firm, steady, and powerful hand until a true prince may take the throne. To believe that his lordship wishes to take it for himself is but folly, a lie propagated by unfit and blinded followers of one who would drive the principality to ruin," Felicity finished with a soft, coquettish smile. Jinak nodded and turned his attention to the blonde woman. "Princess Clara, how do you reply?" Unfazed by Felicity's words, Clara replied gently. "These truly are tumultuous times. I agree in this regard with Lady Felicity. However, have you forgotten that my uncle, Cornelius Draymore, brought it upon us all? He spoke an impassioned speech before the Council of Nobles. Even I considered his reasonings, but they were not enough to sway the council. What did he do in response to their denial to declare him Lord Regent? He betrayed us all. How many hundreds of lives were lost in his initial move to seize the throne through a coup? How long had he been preparing for such an assault? These black ships were not produced within the principality. Who produced and transported them to the Duke's territory?" Her purple eyes settled on Felicity, piercing her with cold indifference. "You call me duplicitous, Lady Felicity, but I am not the one who planned years in advance to strike against her family for the sake of power. Whatever truths my uncle spoke were tarnished by his actions. If Lord Jinak must be wary of me due to my past actions, to be standoffish of the Reaper," she said as she swung her right arm slowly, imitating a scythe across the table's surface, "then he must positively doubt every sentence that runs past your lips. How can anyone be sure to trust a betrayer, liar, and backstabber when it is proven he is not but a craven and a cheat?" To Felicity's credit, she too remained unfazed by Clara's retort. Jinak, for his part, hummed deeply. "Princess Clara brings up a valid point, Lady Felicity. What assurances does my house have that Duke Draymore will not simply remove us from our ancestral lands and place his followers in our stead? He had moved against his family and prepared extensively for this coup beforehand. How can I side with Duke Draymore knowing that mine and my family's lives are at the shifting whims of a traitor?" "His Lord Regent," Felicity began, but was interrupted by Jinak smacking the table with his bare palm. "I do not recognize his claim as Lord Regent. The Council of Nobles didn't either. You will not use that title again or these negotiations shall end," Jinak threatened in no uncertain terms. Felicity bowed her head slightly. "Forgive my lack of oversight, Lord Jinak. To us who follow his righteous path, he is anything but. Nevertheless, I shall acquiesce. His lordship, Duke Draymore, only wishes what's best for the principality. What great accomplishment has the prince done since the title was bestowed upon him? He has only sat on the throne, enjoying and feasting on the riches of his realm without doing anything. Why, Her Majesty Princess Clara has achieved more than her brother. Duke Draymore wants nothing more than to have a strong prince to guide the principality." "Strong yet empty words," Clara countered. "What I have done matters not. My brother, the prince, has not forced the council to elevate him in 3 years since the title was passed unto him. He never overreached nor abused his rightful authority. You ask what his achievements are? His achievements lie in maintaining strong relations between quarreling noble houses, ensuring that more resources and budget are directed to the fleets, encouraging technological development, and much more. Is peace not a worthy goal to strive for? Before my uncle betrayed him, he had plans to reach out to the Yikanti hierarchy and slowly cease the tense hostilities between our peoples. Felicity let out a soft scoff. Peace is a worthy goal, Your Majesty. How is it achieved? Well, that's another matter entirely. What more proof of weakness do you require, Lord Genak? The prince wishes to bow down to our alien enemies before strengthening the principality. Duke Draymore wishes for us to be strong, to reclaim the territories lost, to push back against the damnable Drazen raiders and the threat the collective poses. Not to mention strike against the Arabian Commonwealth and end their threat forever, too. What can we expect with such a prince sitting on the throne of the principality? War, famine, economic recession, countless rebellions and uprisings? The room went silent for several seconds as the two women stared at each other, unwilling to take a step back. Finally, it was HFY who broke the silence. Peace is indeed good for us all, but when that peace is threatened, it requires a strong prince to lead the principality, not an idealist who is easily deceived by his own kin, tragic as that tale may be. Lady Felicity speaks harsh truths, and they do not fall on deaf ears. Nevertheless, the issue of succession and who is to sit on the throne matters little to House Ferentis. We wish to remain neutral in this conflict of interest as it is our right to do so, she said as her oldest son, Jolty, continued. House Ferentis is not known for its military might. We are not defenseless, but we are certainly not a powerhouse. Our diplomatic relations and proximity with houses Caiston, Rheinstein, and Finnegan have ensured that we do not need to focus on the fields of technology and military power. This has, to our great peril, meant that the patrols from the 3rd and 4th fleets, now standing in opposition, are gone now. Our regular protectors and guardians have dispersed, following orders whilst many have left their posts in fear. This has largely left us without proper protection from invaders, organized pirate raids, and other incursions. My Lord Father, Genak Ferentis, asks the following. What do you offer and what do you demand? Princess Clara, you shall speak first. Thank you, Lord Jolty, Clara began. I, Princess Clara Astor, second princess of the Astorian Principality, speaking as the voice of the prince and acting under his complete authority and most assiduous behalf, offer the following. House Astor and our allies offer a commercial pact with House Ferentis on matters of foodstuffs and other materials produced related to agricultural goods. This pact is to be exclusive in nature. No commerce of these same products shall be offered to the forces aligned with the treacherous Duke Cornelius Draymore. Breaching this pact would carry hefty fines and an immediate blockade by Principality naval forces. In return, all goods shall be bought at an increased 15% base price. No tariffs on your behalf shall be demanded, and House Ferentis shall receive a 20-year-long 40% reduction on the payment of its due taxes. She stopped for a moment, letting the weight of her offer to sink in. As for our demands, House Ferentis is to proclaim their support to the rightful ruler of the principality, the prince, reject all future diplomatic relations with enemy forces, refuse to house shelter, offer repair, or come to the aid of enemy forces in all aspects and areas, and denounce Duke Cornelius Draymore's treachery for what it is publicly. Wyatt felt a ball of iron form in his throat, but he refused to swallow it as the tension in the room was so thick he was sure he could reach out with a hand and grab it. As a commoner, he had been taught that nobles had absolute power and that royalty commanded them all without question. It was such a simple notion to understand and learn. Do as I say, because I'm above you. And yet, here was Clara, a royal and Astor, dealing with other powerful nobles that were, regardless of anything, beneath her, and yet instead of ordering them around, she was making deals, offering promises, and demanding only what felt reasonable. So this is what true diplomacy among nobles looks like. Dealing with Uriel Holks was unnecessary. Clara wasn't threatening him at all. She was stating facts. And in Matcha, the procession and the banquet were just displays of power and reason to make talk. But this is how insults can be spoken without worrying about consequences, and lies and truth mingle into some twisted poison, Wyatt thought with a sense of apprehensive disgust. He knew that the lives and the plays of power between nobles weren't as simple as most commoners pictured in their heads. Mr. Warlow taught him that things were not so straightforward, no matter how much he wanted things to be so. And now that he'd seen it firsthand, he was finally starting to understand what being a noble meant, and what the structure and balance of power was a delicate, shifting thing. Not something set in stone and immutable. He felt sick to his stomach for a moment, but his resolve purged it in favor of standing firm next to his friends, showing his support, no matter how insignificant it was. Javier Wunder scoffed before smiling a condescending smile. "Pardon me, Your Majesty, but was that your best offer?" he asked, his tone matching his expression. "For if it was, then I'm afraid that House Astor shows their prepotency in full display. Or, perhaps, is it fear?" He let out a little laugh before continuing. "A paltry sum of credits, a chain around the neck of an entire great house, and every minor and lesser house serving under the rightful rule of Lord Geenock, a bribe masqueraded as a reward, and an outrageous demand that would isolate them? If your underhanded attempts were not so brazen, I would applaud you, Reaper," he said, putting emphasis on the last word. "Your proposed offer is generous at first glance, Princess," Janik agreed. "However, I will not sign any treaty that forces my house to surrender its neutrality in this conflict. Exclusive trading rights I can consider as a manageable deal, nothing else. Tempting as the lower rate of taxes is, I'm afraid the answer is simple. I refuse this first proposal." Turning to Felicity, he waved his hand around. "Lady Felicity, what does Duke Draymore offer and demand in turn? His lordship is a sensible man and generous to those that stand next to him, but he is also a reasonable man who avoids putting his foot on the throat of those under his leadership. Lord Joaquin Ferrentis, Duke Cornelius Draymore, offers an exclusive commercial pact in regard to foodstuffs and other assorted items to be provided to those loyal to him as true sons and daughters of the principality. He offers a most generous 25 base price upfront increase. However, you shall be allowed to retain your ability to deal with other neutral houses freely. Only our deluded enemies are to be offered naught but ash to fill their bellies. And understanding your position of neutrality, his lordship will allow you to maintain your stance until the situation is resolved." The fetching woman stopped for a moment, her eyes landing on the man wearing a gray-colored armor so dark it might as well be black obsidian for a second or two before continuing. "His lordship only demands that no harbor is to be given to his enemies, and that you recognize his position as Lord Regent." She let out a tiny sigh as she finished. "It is wondrous what a show of genuine respect and understanding can bring to the table, is it not, Your Majesty?" Clara didn't reply. She merely kept her regal posture, unbending and ever-focused. Your offer has merit, Lady Felicity. However, I, nor any member of House Ferrentis for that matter, shall recognize Duke Draymore as Lord Regent. The prince stands, this is a fact. His Majesty was going to be fully elevated by the Council of Nobles, which the Duke disrupted, and, as a child throwing a tantrum, moved to gain what he believed was rightfully his by force. Tell me, do the councillors yet live, his captured nieces and nephews? Do you expect me to support a man that by all intents and purposes is a traitor?" Geenock asked, frowning. "The councillors are alive and well. They are welcomed guests of his lordship, of course. So are their Majesties Princes Caldro and Leon and their sisters, Princesses Megan and Ruby," Casimir replied proudly. "So they are prisoners," Clara commented offhandedly. "They are his lordship's guests, not prisoners. They are not being flogged or tortured for information. I assure you, Your Majesty, they are well tended and in perfect health. And even if they were prisoners, we are not like you and your followers, who delight in the use of brute force and any means necessary to extract information out of your prisoners," Felicity huffed. "Unlike certain people, we are not animals. We are civilized and above such cruelty." "Even with my helmet on, I can smell the shit that's coming out of her mouth," Wyatt thought, frowning. "I'm pleased to hear that if I, or any of those who follow me, were to fall into your hands, Lady Felicity, we would be treated fairly," Clara replied gently, and Wyatt wasn't sure if she was being honest or if she was mocking the ebony-skinned woman across the table. "My uncle surely is a practical, reasonable man. My Lord Geenock, I have passed unto you the official proposal sent by my brother the prince. You have rejected it, and thus now I shall speak of my own offer spoken with the full use of his authority, if you so give me permission to do so." Jinak made a motion with his hand a second later. "My offer sees not many changes, I'm afraid, but it is better suited. The commercial pact stands, offering a 20% increase instead of 15. You will also receive a privileged 0.05% wide tariff increase rate throughout all of your agricultural transactions for the duration of 5 generations of your bloodline and a 5-year-long exemption in your yearly tax payments. And, most pointedly, your neutral stance shall not only be respected, but upheld. My demands are as follows: that you denounce the actions carried by my uncle, Duke Cornelius Draymore, as treachery, and that his standing as Lord Regent is both illegal and immoral. Every ally to my uncle is to be refused a proper welcome, but offer services and aid if need be at a 500 increased rate." "That's absurd," said Maximilian in his booming voice. "You may as well throw any unfortunate soul that winds up in Ferentis territory into the core of a star and spare them the humiliation. You're just trying to ensure that any wounded ship is forever anchored here until the conflict ends. In your defeat, I might add." "Ah, you must be the acclaimed Maximilian Usurek. Your face and armor seemed familiar, but I wasn't sure and didn't want to assume," Clara retorted with a small smirk. "Under other circumstances, I would ask for your autograph. Alas, you are my enemy, esteemed lone wolf." "An admirer? I'm almost honored, Your Majesty." "Well, a fan is a fan, that's what I say. Who am I to deny you the grand opportunity of meeting me? Princess, enemies we may be, but only in the field of battle. It would shame me to rob you of the pleasure of owning my autograph," he declared, with dripping overconfidence and self-aggrandizement, as a lion's mouth opened its mouth to eject a golden paper with green trims. He took it, and after placing it on the table, he pointed his left index finger at the paper. A red laser erupted from the tip, the paper crackling but not bending or burning upon contact, and he quickly scribbled something on it. When he was done, he slid the paper at Clara, crossing the distance with ease. "The honor is all yours, Princess," he said, putting on his best toothy grin. Clara took the piece of paper with genuine glee and nonchalantly stored it within her dress. "He's a lone wolf?" Wyatt asked himself, surprised. He'd only read and seen a few lone wolves through videos or pictures, mostly in lectures. He knew lone wolves by reputation, all of them deadly and highly skilled men and women. In fact, most of his knowledge came from the man who was considered the first lone wolf, Luminor Tintar, a supremely skilled fighter pilot, a deadly warrior, an intelligence agent without equal, and a man credited with thousands of kills in his long, proud career that was the stuff of legend. He wasn't much for visual entertainment, but he enjoyed the movies made around the legendary lone wolf. Comparing Luminor Tintar to Maximilian Usurek was unfair in his mind. The man was obviously strong and fit. Standing next to him, he doubted he could reach past his broad shoulders, but his expression and the air around him told him everything he needed to know. Maximilian Usurek was a noble through and through. The arrogance was dripping from his cocky grin, and his eyes gleamed with barely contained mockery. His armor was of high quality and likely cost a small fortune, but it was flashy and unpractical. There was no doubt in his mind. He was before a noble that put his ego and pride before anything else. And yet Clara recognized him and wanted his autograph? Aren't lone wolves supposed to be incredibly talented warriors capable of going anywhere and do almost anything? He asked himself, his disappointment giving way to curiosity and wariness. As if reading his mind, which no longer surprised him that much anymore, Clara spoke up. "Thank you kindly, Lord Maximilian. To be honest, I covet the autographs of the lone wolves that have caught my attention. You are most certainly among those few. Call it a silly whim of mine," confessed the princess, a soft giggle escaping her lips at the end. "I followed your career until you retired a few years back. A true shame. You were a most fantastic racer and dogfighter." "Aren't we all?" Maximilian replied with a laugh. "My reasons for my retirement are my own, Princess." "But of course," Clara replied. "It is saddening that you are our enemy, Lord Maximilian. I would have bought your services if possible. Your talents would be surely welcomed." Maximilian laughed again. "I'm sorry to say, Princess, that I would have rejected your offer. I do like my head attached to my shoulders," he said. not bothering to hide his insult. "Besides, you got her with you." He pointed at Cynthia. Then he pointed at Wyatt. "And you also got that one. You make a habit of keeping dangerous pets around. And unlike them, I am not a pet you can tame, princess." "Duly noted," the blonde woman replied. Turning to Geenock, she continued, "Do forgive my lapse in courtesy, Lord Geenock, but I believe we needed a small break to refresh our minds and hold back our tongues. As much as I would like to continue tomorrow, my Lord Geenock, I do not have the luxury of wasting your time, or that of his lordship, for very long. Fret not, for I, too, speak with the authority of his lordship." She waited a moment for dramatic effect, then pressed on. "His lordship seeks no quarrel with House Ferentis. Therefore, the demand to be recognized as Lord Regent shall be dropped. In addition, the base price exclusivity shall be raised to 32%, and a formal pact of neutrality and non-aggression shall be signed." "Will this entail that Third Fleet patrols are to be dispatched once more through their usual routes?" asked Yolte. "Unfortunately, no. His lordship requires all available warships loyal to him to aid him in this conflict. Only those who support him directly and recognize his claim as Lord Regent are to be considered with the protection the Hammer of Draymore brings," Javier replied. "Surely you understand his difficult position. Even our territories are bereft of the fleet's protection in these dire times. We simply have no ships to spare on simple patrol duties at the moment. If you were to support his lordship, who knows? Things may change in the coming months." "I understand," Janik replied, then turned to face the princess. "Given the circumstances and the urgency all parties involved are facing, these dealings shall conclude today. Princess Clara, do you have a counteroffer?" "You require ships that we cannot spare. If my uncle lacks the numbers even with his tactical and strategical advantage to aid you without pushing you against a corner with no other options at your disposal, in that venue my brother, the prince, stands less of a chance to come to your protection in significant numbers. Everything I can do now is to increase the exemption on your taxes to 10 years and respect your neutral stance with the signing of an official non-aggression pact. This is my final offer," she said, finally losing the edge of control in her voice. "I see. If that's the best you can offer, Your Majesty, then I'm afraid I will have to reject you," Geenock declared before opening the cylinder. It revealed a pristine white piece of parchment. Silently, he handed it over to Felicity, and she happily took it. She passed it to Javier, who produced a pen from within his uniform, and the man quickly began to scribble on the piece of paper. The room was silent for long minutes until Javier passed it to Felicity, who read it quickly, nodded, signed it, and then produced a signet from her bosom. The Ferentis son with dazzling hair, who had remained silent through the entire procedure, produced a candle and a lighter from his robes. He stood up and walked to Felicity's side, lighting the candle and dropping hot wax on the paper. Felicity used the signet to press the cooling wax for a few seconds, then pulled it back. The robed man then took the paper and handed it over to his father. Geenock read it, nodded, and repeated the wax and signet process at the bottom of the paper. Rolling it up, he placed it inside the cylinder only to seal it after. "This meeting is adjourned. House Ferentis shall retain its neutral position until this conflict is over, granting exclusive commercial rights on all agricultural goods and foodstuffs to neutral associates and Duke Cornelius Draymore's forces," Ishvi pronounced, standing up. "Loyalty is its own reward." "Loyalty is its own reward," everyone else chanted back. But Wyatt felt defeated, the words losing some of their weight as he spoke them. Clara extended her arms a second later and, moving in unison, both Cynthia and the pilot helped the princess to her feet. "Congratulations on your victory, Lady Felicity. You have bested me fairly," Clara proclaimed, but her usual gentleness was lacking. As much as she tried to mask it, she had failed in her task, and Wyatt sensed it. "Something's off. This doesn't feel right," Wyatt thought, his eyes never leaving the princess. "You fought well, Your Majesty. Your reputation does you justice, but alas, experience is everything," Felicity replied, unable to entirely hide the boastful joy in her voice. "Now we shall take our leave. Oh, I almost forgot, Princess. May I see the face of your black-clad warrior?" "Certainly. Wyatt?" Clara replied. Wordlessly, Wyatt obeyed, detaching his helmet and showing his face and serious expression to the Draymore delegates. "My, He's as handsome as I imagined. Heterochromatic eyes? Are they natural or gene-altered? She giggled, swaying her hips as she turned around. No matter, I suppose. Thank you for entertaining my curiosity, Your Majesty. And thank you, Sir Knight. Without you, my victory wouldn't have been possible, exclaimed the woman in a sultry tone before winking at Wyatt and walking away with her head held high. Wyatt! Clara said his name, putting pressure into it that he'd only heard when she was deadly serious about something. We shall talk in private. Yes, of course, my princess, Wyatt replied, utterly confused by what was happening. What did Felicity mean by that? Was Clara angry at him? Lord Genac, I shall make use of my quarters for a little while longer, Clara added. Of course, my princess. I shall see you off in 2 hours from now, Genac replied. Silently, Clara walked out of the room and down the hallway, never speaking, never stopping. Wyatt glanced at Cynthia, but the blue-haired woman was also silent, and he couldn't see her face thanks to her helmet, but he couldn't feel any animosity coming from her, which only served to confuse him even more. What the hell had he done?